Luke Duecy here with Chris Sullivan, again talking about safety on the interstate, especially when it comes to tractor trailers, big rigs, hauling down the road, smashing into, and you've seen it in the headlines recently, overpasses and bridges. We've got the 167 that happened in recent months, the 410, and now the I-90 Bullfrog Pass overpass, which was near Clear Elm.
Yep, milepost 80 on I-90.
So you talked with WSP recently and some others. Bring us up to speed. Where are we and what have you learned?
Well, basically, I just wanted to go over some of the rules for commercial vehicles because, I mean, we drive cars. I'm assuming you don't have a CDL. I don't have a CDL,
No.
commercial driver's license. We see the big rigs. We share the roads with them. And so just kind of like, what are the requirements? What kind of things do they need to have? What kind of requirements do their rigs have to have? You may not know, Washington State Patrol has a commercial division, and their job is to only monitor truck traffic in our state. And in fact, they don't even have to have probable cause to pull over a truck. They can do it. That's the standard in Washington. They can pull over a truck at any time and just start asking questions. There are 3 levels of investigation or inspection. Level 3 is, hey, can I see your CDL? Let me check the paperwork. Is your weight match up with what we have? Level 2 is, when I drove up behind you, I thought there might be a flat tire or something. Let me just do a once around your rig. Level 1 is, okay, I as a trooper, I'm getting on my back. I'm underneath the truck. I'm checking the belts, the hoses, the brakes, the everything to make sure your truck is ready to go. And, they can violate you for a variety of things and send you down the road. Or in some cases, if the truck isn't good to go or you as the driver aren't good to go, you're put at what is called out of service, and you're done until you fix those issues, and you can't drive anymore.
So, I've also seen, when there are concerns about tired truckers on the interstates as well. I have been at a weigh station with WSP one time, and, call it a trick or whatever it is, but I call it a tactic in police work. When you've got a tired trucker and they kind of know it, sometimes truckers keep 2 different logbooks, maybe even more. And I've seen Washington State Patrol take a logbook and then kind of put it out of sight and then look at the truck driver and say, hey, I need you to get your logbook for me. And they go and get, their second logbook they're not supposed to have. But it's all in an effort to keep the roads safe. So what you just talked about, all those things, how are we relating that now to, let's just talk about the one affecting all of us right now through the I-90 corridor and the Bullfrog overpass.
In that case, that driver was only cited $250. If you can think of, for knocking out an overpass that 1,500 people use a day to go from north to south there in Cle Elum over the top of I-90. What happened in that case is the driver failed to follow the instructions on the permit he was given. Now, in this case, coming along I-90, if you're an overheight rig, you have to get a permit from the Department of Transportation. And that permit may be pages and pages and pages long. It goes over every height, every bridge, every overpass, every construction zone so that you know where you are supposed to go or not to go. And in this particular case on I-90, it is clearly spelled out in the permit. At milepost 80 Bullfrog, you must get off the freeway, go over the overpass and back down onto the freeway there. Don't go underneath because the bridge it's not going to cover your height. And in case anybody knows, the maximum vehicle in height in Washington is 14 feet. If you're over 14 feet, you need to get a permit. If you're higher than 14.6, you need a pilot car. And then it kind of goes up and down from there based on your size, your width, what you're hauling, whether or not you might need a couple of pilot cars. But in this case, the pilot car told him to get off. There was a miscommunication there. The permit wasn't followed, and that's what happened.
And in fact, one of the troopers who was at that scene that morning told me over the phone that it acted like, if you're a truck driver who knows that area and you've been through there with oversized loads, going over the pass and the Kwame Pass a bunch of times, he said, everyone knows that when it comes to milepost 80, that you go up and around, and they all know that, unless you're from out of town, or maybe the crew, or there was a miscommunication. We do know about the load, at least. No, I don't, not about the truck itself, where they were coming from. And I don't. Maybe you have more information on the truck, but the load itself, we did read on the back, is part of an oil project called the Willow Project. That's part of oil drilling up in Alaska. So perhaps there's a big tank that was empty, but it was going up that direction, we think. But any word on the company itself, because we're going to get into a little bit about
Well, the state's going to have to recoup the money somehow.
Exactly. Who's responsible and how are they going to get the money back?
And one thing we could do before we transition to this, sure. I know there's been a big national conversation about, perhaps folks with immigration status issues driving the trucks, or people who can't speak English, not following signs. In fact, we've had 2 fatal crashes in the last couple of months, one in California last week and one in Florida, where drivers who could not speak English were involved in crashes that killed people. And so the question becomes, do you have to speak English to have a CDL? And the answer is clearly yes. You need to be able to speak English to get a CDL. So then the question becomes, how do these people who cannot speak English get a CDL? So I asked the State Patrol, what happens there? Is there an English test? Is there something? And what it turns out to be is, it's not really a test, but just like any trooper or police officer pulling us over, they kind of get a vibe in a little conversation with us when we roll down the window. If there's a language issue and the trooper doesn't believe that they understand, they can kind of go over things together in English. And if the person doesn't pass that particular part, they can put them out of service. And what's interesting is that was always the case. But in 2016, the rule was changed to mean if you failed that part of the test, lack of English proficiency, you'd just get a violation, but you could drive down the road. Trump administration changed it back to the original rules this year, and that's why there's been a lot of highlighted national focus on this, especially since there have been a couple of cases nationally where English was an issue and these drivers were involved in fatal crashes.
And not necessarily that this is a political issue.
No,
what we're saying at all, but it's
part of the puzzle. It's part of the discussion.
Absolutely. But it also speaks to the demands of where we are is, we need goods and services to get to where they need to go.
Nothing goes without a truck.
I know that
nothing goes without a truck.
There's not a day I go by and I come home and there's an Amazon package waiting on my next to the door. So that stuff gets to our doors somehow. There's demand for it, and that's where those things are born out of.
And
that's
they
where
need drivers too,
right? And that's where the debate starts as well. So earlier or yesterday, actually Monday, as we're taping this, I spoke with the Attorney General, Nick Brown. He was in our studio for other things, and I kind of grabbed him and asked him a few different questions about a few different topics, including this one right here. And I have my cheat sheet because I can't remember verbatim everything he said. But we touched on 3 things, and I'd love for you to kind of comment on these as well. Number one is, first and foremost, repairing the Bullfrog overpass, that milepost 80, the overpass we're talking about outside of Cle Elum and Roslyn, and that everyone's happy that no one was seriously hurt in this. It could have been a lot worse, but he's also said his second point that I want to make, that he's working with WSDOT right now to get all the facts of the collision, who was involved, exactly what happened, to take next steps. So do you have insight from talking with state troopers of where they are in that investigation?
No, nothing yet. At this point, it basically goes to, we got to do what we can to get the money to tear that bridge down, gets up, federal disaster money or federal money, which they have done or applied for, as they have done in several of the bridge strikes here recently. Get it taken down, open up I-90, and then figure out how to rebuild that overpass. So in that next process will become, okay, how do we get the company who created this damage to pay back the state of Washington for that? In a lot of cases, it ends up in court. And I think probably the one that
case in point,
2013, we had the Skagit River Bridge come down. In that case, the truck driver didn't follow his permit either, nor did the pilot car driver, because that bridge, the outside was a little shorter than the center of the bridge, and the permit said you must drive that vehicle in that center lane. Yep. Well, what happened? He was in the right lane, and ding, 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 the bridge comes down, knocked over all the trusses. It took 6 years of litigation, including a Washington State Supreme Court ruling, before the state of Washington was able to get the money back for the repairs that they had to do on the front end. So there's generally isn't always a quick resolution to this, but that's probably where this is heading.
And I'm shaking my head because I think a lot of people watching and listening will probably, they're shaking their heads. Like it shouldn't necessarily take that long if there's a
couple of good lawyers and a couple of just discrepancies about what they said or didn't say, or the permit. That's the way that one ended up.
Yeah, there are nuances. There are nuances to the law as well, which brings me to my third point in my discussion with the Attorney General, Nick Brown. He wants to tackle laws. I mean, I know there's a law being floated around by King County
Reagan Dunn, was it the idiot's law or what is
the
it?
Idiot's law, something like that, where he's floating around. We should really make it easier to recoup money and go after trucks and the truck companies. Well, Brown reiterated that, and now he's going to be, after looking at this, and they're going to be talking with WSP, but also state lawmakers in the near future and in the next coming year to think about what laws, and he's suggesting the state lawmakers come up with new laws that will make it easier and quicker to go after not only truckers, but these truck companies, especially if this keeps happening.
Yeah, well, let's just remember the one thing. You're right. Goods don't get anywhere without the truck drivers. We need to give those truck drivers plenty of space and be safe around them. But yeah, just there's a lot going on right now in this particular space. And again, we're not trying to be political. These are just, the facts as we know them. And just be safe out there as you're driving. Not only your truck drivers who we rely on, but the people around them. And let's just be safe.
Yeah, great points. And I think most truck drivers out there are great drivers, and they follow the rules. And we're only talking about a really small handful that can make a huge impact. All right, that's what we've got. But you can rest assured that we are going to be back here as soon as we have new information, following these stories every step of the way. Chris Sullivan, Luke Duecy, we'll see you next time.